Hello, everyone, and welcome to another video here on the Sports Daily Media Network YouTube channel. We've got our college football playoff semifinal number one preview. This is the Capital One Orange Bowl from Miami. We've got the Notre Dame Fighting Irish playing up against the Penn State Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and I'm joined by Joe Meade. Joe, this is the 6 seed versus the 7 seed. Penn State taking care of business 2 times in a row so far in the playoffs, and the same can be said of Notre Dame. Um, Neither team has played a particularly close game yet, but this game really could go either way. We've got James Franklin against Marcus Freeman, but from a Penn State point of view, Joe, what are they looking to do in this one to potentially score some points and win?
I think it's we use the word efficiency a lot in the recap against Boise State. I think we're going to use the word versatility a lot in this preview when it comes to both offenses. Between Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, and Drew Aller, I think those are three very good running threats, and I included Drew Aller in that. He's this year done a phenomenal job running. I thought he did so in 2023 as well. He didn't do as good a job protecting the ball as I would have wanted him to last year, but he was a first-year starter, so I think if you take the Penn State five-star out of it, a lot of people would understand that. Now, in terms of this year, Sean, last the last game against Boise State was indicative of how lethal it can be when just one of them is doing it. And that was Katron Allen. Nick Singleton, by all accounts, besides the 60-yard TD run he had, was pretty pedestrian, I'd say. That's the word I'd use. And there's been games like that where he's not necessarily gotten going and Katron Allen hasn't picked him up, but it didn't really matter because they passed all over said team because the team was far worse than Penn State. Let's face the facts here. If they open up that run game, I think it could pose a lot of problems for Notre Dame, particularly because Aller could keep it. Aller could just find his cheat code of a tight end in Tyler Warren, and he could find one of these receivers. Penn State's receiving core going into the year, I think a lot of their fans were disappointed in the personnel there. I do think between Omari Evans and Harrison Wallace, they've gotten it together. I don't think they're great receivers by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think uh, if you catch teams off guard and you get them in good sets, which Andy Kolnicki's put them in most of the year, these guys can't get open. These guys can't get yards after the catch. So definitely not enough for Notre Dame to just play man every single time. I do think they will lock down to a degree Tyler Warren at certain points with Ben Morrison and that great Notre Dame secondary. But I do think to simplify a game plan against a team that can beat you running and passing is is going to be challenging for Al Golden. I don't think he's faced an offense this good in the playoff. I do think you could argue with me that USC's offense was very good. You can't argue with me that Northern Illinois' offense was very good, but outside of that, I do think Penn State's best bet here is to establish the run game early, and I think that'll open up a lot of possibilities for Andy Kolnicki.
And while you were talking there, Joe, I did a little research on Notre Dame's rushing defense. I know it grades out really well. I actually think that them playing the military schools has made their rushing stats look worse than they actually are. Obviously, Navy and Army both got to 200 yards rushing against Notre Dame. Nobody else did that in my quick little search there, and including back-to-back playoff defensive performances of keeping your opponent under 75 yards rushing. That's incredible. And I think they're going to have to, maybe not to that level, but they're going to have to make Penn State maybe try something else at some point because we know how good Notre Dame's defense is. We know how trending up Penn State's offense is. Penn State's defense has been good all year. I think their defense has been really good in these two playoff games, especially since that Oregon Big Ten championship game where they kind of got picked apart. But I do think the Penn State offense versus the Notre Dame defense is going to be the key matchup here. Can what's gonna budge here? Is Penn State's offense going to continue to look good, or is Notre Dame's defense going to make them struggle in a way that they haven't really since the Ohio State game? But Notre Dame's rushing defense is really good. Penn State's running attack is pretty good. And before we go to the other side of the ball, Joe, anything to add in that department?
No, I think the chess match between Kolnicki and Golden is the chess match of the game for me. I do think Notre Dame on offense, we've seen it, right? And that's not to say they're not versatile in a lot of ways. And they also have a great tight end in Evans, but I do think this is the matchup that will decide the game.
And let's flip it to the other side of the ball, Joe. Notre Dame offense versus Penn State defense. Notre Dame's rushing attack, again, like Penn State's, has been very good this year. And like you said before, it's a three-pronged attack for Notre Dame too. That's um, Love, Price, and the quarterback Riley Leonard. Love has been banged up. Not entirely sure how he is doing. He had that huge run against Indiana, and then I think had 8 carries, 8 more carries for 8 yards. Did almost nothing against Georgia. Obviously, him being fully healthy is huge. Price has done okay as the lead back at times, but last game it really came down to Riley Leonard just taking over when he had to. If I'm Notre Dame, I'm looking to probably establish some quarterback runs early. Maybe make Penn State put a defender on that. Maybe you get a favorable matchup somewhere else. But like the other side of the ball, Joe, I think Notre Dame's running attack is going to be key, whether they can score or whether Penn State can get them off the field.
I think all of that's true, Sean. I do think one comparable matchup Penn State's defense had against a quarterback of this caliber. It's not Luke Altmaier, so I don't want to hear that in the comments or in my messages. It's Will Howard, right? I think Will Howard's a little worse of a scrambler
And a little better of
than
a thrower.
yeah than Riley Leonard, but I do think in terms of a thrower, he's probably definitively better. Not nothing crazy, but I'd say most 9 out of 10 college football fans would agree with that statement. So, Sean, I do think Riley Leonard's going to have to be a lot smarter about what he runs. We mentioned in the Georgia game, I think it was you who mentioned that he could have rushed the ball a heck of a lot more than he did, and that could have put his 80 rushing yards he had in that game to an even higher, maybe even a 100, 110. In this game, I don't think he can make those mistakes. And with this pass rush, it's lethal. I do think Abdul Carter will play. We're recording this on Monday, Tuesday. As of now, it looks like he's going to play based on all the social media posts he's teasing and whatnot. Regardless, Penn State's going to get to the quarterback. He's going to have to make his mind up really quickly, and they have to stay at a third and obvious passing. If they don't do that, I understand Notre Dame's had a terrific year. Penn State's pass rush will get to you, whether you're Notre Dame, whether you're Ohio State, whether you're in Illinois. All the good teams they play this year, even including Oregon, they got to them when they needed to. Albeit Dylan Gabriel stood in there, made some terrific throws. I don't think Riley Leonard will make the same throws that Dylan Gabriel. Maybe of the 5 Gabriel made, Riley Leonard could make 1 or 2, but I don't think he's making 3 or 4. So uh, it's really the key to any time you play a Penn State defense shot. Establish the run, stay out of third and obvious passing, and be unpredictable. That doesn't necessarily mean throw a trick play, but make sure they have to count for Evans. Make sure maybe they commit an extra defender to the pass on a 3rd and 4, and you end up giving it to Love or Price. So I think there's a lot of options Notre Dame can do. I do think those dwindle pretty drastically if you lose first and second down.
And I don't think there's really a team that is going to try and attack Penn State like Notre Dame will. Um, has off the top of my head, I can't really think of a team that's really tried to establish the run first against Penn State that's been of comparable value. I mean, Illinois is probably the closest one, but um, there's two key factors that I don't think the other team has in this game, and Tyler Warren is definitely one for Penn State. Notre Dame does not have anybody like him. They're going to have to get creative with how they cover him. He is definitely the biggest issue that the Notre Dame defense will have to be prepared for. We've seen a ton of trick plays with him, Joe. And then on the other side of the ball, we've seen a ton of trick plays on special teams by Marcus Freeman. We saw one against Indiana and one against Georgia. And the kicking situation for the Fighting Irish was a real problem all year. Mitch Jeter was injured, then he came back and he was still kind of injured. But he's been pretty good. He had a kick blocked against Indiana, but he did make a couple, and then he did make a few against Georgia too. So I don't know if that'll be a distinct advantage for Notre Dame, but I don't think it'll be the big disadvantage that it has been for them all year.
John, I do think that's a big factor. One thing else to consider on the special team side, James Franklin in his career, the big game James, we've talked about it so many times on our Big Ten specific podcasts. He's done some pretty stupid things on special teams, but the one thing he did well this year was the Minnesota fake punt. I thought that was one of the most creative plays I've seen. I'm not giving him credit for drawing him up, but I'm giving him credit for not vetoing it at the 11th hour. And should they pull something out like that, it could be a big play. My biggest guess, to be quite honest, I don't think a special teams trick play will necessarily come into effect. I think Penn State's probably driven themselves crazy enough where Notre Dame could option into it, and I don't think they will because I think they'll see that Penn State's prepared for the look. In a game like this is closer to a Big Ten game than anything, which is why I've always made fun of Notre Dame at this stage for not being in the Big Ten. This kind of gives me a vintage Wisconsin like 2010s versus Penn State kind of feel in a way. Field position's going to matter. Establishing the run is the biggest factor in the game, and
Kicking
not
is
turning
going to
the ball
matter.
over. Yeah, kicking's going to matter. Should this game be a firefight, like a 38-35 game, I'd be astonished, to be completely honest with you. So, before we get into our prediction, Sean, any final comments?
I was going to say this, Joe. I think there's definitely going to be a fake punt in this game.
Wow,
I
all
don't
right.
know. I don't know who it's going to be from. I think a fake field goal counts too for this prediction, but we've seen so many trick plays from Franklin with Warren this year. I think maybe something is turned into special teams, and Penn State knowing how good Notre Dame is on these special teams, maybe they try and pull a fast one, and then like we've seen multiple times from Notre Dame. I think maybe people are so used to it and expect it now that people don't think they'll do it. Oh, they've seen it on film. They're probably not going to do it now. But I think there will be a trick play on special teams here, and I think it might just be the difference. But Joe, the prediction time. Who have you got moving on to the national championship?
So the real most important prediction, there won't be a fake special teams play. That's going to be the distinction from my colleague on the other screen here. The real score prediction I'll give you right now. I think Notre Dame gets it done 26-24. I think this will be a really tight game. I do think that Penn State will turn the ball over once, not necessarily late, but early in the third quarter, it ends up costing them a lot. It affords Notre Dame an extra possession, which allows them to kick a field goal, and I do think their defense does not let Penn State cross the 50 as time expires. So give me the Fighting Irish to punch their ticket to their first national title game since 2012-13.
Joe, I am going to stick with my bracket. That is 8 for 8 so far, and I've got the Irish winning 23-21. I just think that they're kind of built for this moment. As bad as the Northern Illinois loss was, they've taken care of business unlike really anybody else this year in terms of getting a lead, keeping a lead, and winning by a lot. Their schedule wasn't as tough as they probably hoped, with a couple of the teams that they played not being as good as they thought. But I just think that there is sort of a buzz going with Notre Dame right now that I'm not sure Penn State is good enough to stop. I think Penn State is probably a slightly better team, but the fact that this game is being played in Florida, really the kind of only not Big Ten thing about this game is that it's being in Florida. It'll be warm. I think the cold weather might play into Penn State's hands a little bit, but I'm going the Irish by 2 on not a game-winning field goal, but one pretty late that goes through to take them from losing to winning.
So you're about my prediction then. I
Yeah.
said they stopped Penn State on the final possession.
Yeah, I think it's more of like a 40 set, like not really a possession, but like kind of a half possession where they get the job done. But yeah, all right, that's all we have for you today. Notre Dame, Penn State at the Orange Bowl. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and check back in a couple of days for our recap.